my research project is about the demographic connection between problematic video game usage and alcohol and tobacco abuse disorders. Now, introduction. Over the past few years, problematic video game usage has been on the rise as access to video games increases, and the amount of kids who play it increases as well. And that can lead to problematic video game usage, which is defined as an addiction to playing video games in which one can have a hard time stopping themselves from playing or continuing to play video games. Now, the issue with problematic video game usage is that there has been a recent connection between problematic video game usage and substance abuse disorders, which can be very harmful to the majority youth audience that plays video games. And one of those main things that has been correlated between problematic video game usage and substance abuse is the positive correlation between poor mental health and both the increased probability of a person developing problematic video game usage and substance abuse disorders. Some demographics have been looked at in this area, mainly gender, education level, and age are the main ones. But there's still many more that have not been explored. And the demographics are important to know about problematic video game usage and substance abuse disorders due to knowing the susceptible population can help us prevent and identify cases in which it may be likely to occur. And my personal interest in this project is that I myself experience problematic video game usage. I spend a lot of my time playing video games, and it interests me to learn more about like what I experience myself. And also psychological problems like addictions have always interested me. I've always been interested in mental health and how that can lead to psychological problems, as I have had some struggles with mental health myself. And my research question is, what are the demographic connections between problematic video game usage and tobacco and alcohol abuse disorder / dependence? So on to my lit review. So problematic video game usage and DSM-5. DSM-5, the Diagnostical Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, defines problematic video game usage as a preoccupation with playing video games the user cannot control or stop. And there was a controversy over its inclusion in DSM-5, which provided criteria for problematic video game usage, because it was based off of DSM-4 researcher created metrics that weren't standardized. And Corrali says that, and researcher Corrali says that the term addiction may suffer potential depreciation because of its permissive nature when used in terms of problematic video games. Despite this, DSM-5 is looked at as the standard for classifying problematic video game usage in research. Well, and then problematic video game use and substance abuse. In DSM-5 and other research articles, problematic video game usage is related to substance addiction. The first main factor of this is the dopamine that comes from playing video games, and especially playing them for long periods of time, which is very similar to the dopamine that is produced when someone takes substances such as alcohol or tobacco. And another one was, when I talked about in my introduction, that poor mental health could lead to a higher probability of both problematic video game usage and substance abuse. And in a study in 2011 by Mazzoni, found that problematic video game usage was associated with lower scores on life satisfaction and increased probability for elevated levels of anxiety and depression. And RIAM, in a survey on Knowledge Panel, found that problematic video game usage is also associated with measures of addiction. And finally, demographics of problematic video game usage are the least explored area of this topic. Most of the current research is focused on more symptoms and the more chemical connection between them. So the demographics aren't looked at as much. But there have been some demographics that have been identified, such as what I previously mentioned, RIAM's large-scale survey through Knowledge Panel that looked for demographic information, but could only really find a positive correlation between gender and problematic video game usage. And another study that found similar results was Van Rijs, who in a sample survey in the Netherlands collected education level, gender, and age, and found that education level and age had very little impact, while gender had a large impact. Now on to my method. And my method is meant to address the demographic gaps seen in the later view. So the survey would be distributed through email at a private all-boys Catholic school in Arizona. The majority of the questions would either be based on the DSM-5 criteria listed on their website, and the goal was around 200 responses. And the instruments to analyze the data was mostly DSM-5, which is the research standard, as I said, for both tobacco and alcohol use disorder, as well as PVG. Not all the criteria was used. For time purposes, I didn't want to overload the respondents with a bunch of questions on all the criteria, and it would hopefully increase the response rate. And the tobacco, alcohol, prescription, and other substances, and video game addiction test criteria were also used to supplement with other questions. And how I analyzed my data, I took statistics, demographic statistics from the survey and compared them between the substance abuse disorder group and problematic video game usage group, and the other statistics I pulled out were ones that addressed the most about the research area. And on to my results. In total, I had about 350 respondents, and 8.6% experienced problematic video game usage, which was 30 total respondents. And only 4 respondents experienced alcohol abuse disorder, and none were found to have tobacco abuse disorder. See, the graph shows wide differences, especially in age and weighted GPA between. And some other interesting results were that the most common criteria found in the problematic video game usage group was that those in that group had tried to or failed to curb their video game usage, despite it having, but failed, even though they clearly stated that they had that they perceived it had a negative impact on their life, and also that the employment rate was much higher in the employment in the alcohol and tobacco abuse groups rather than the general survey population. And so for my first discussion, I'll be answering my research question about the demographic. Now the first one that sticks out is annual household income, which is supported by my literature review, as a study by Elgar found that higher income households lead to a higher level of average alcohol consumption. And a study by Ankari and Babel found that video games, the problematic video game usage was not necessarily correlated with a higher household income. Now the second one is age, that alcohol abuse groups and had a higher average age than the problematic video game usage group. This could be due to the high stress that age group brings. The average is about 16.5 in the alcohol abuse group, which is associated with the junior year, which is usually the most stressful year. The next one would be employment status, as there was a extremely large gap between the group of problematic video game usage respondents that were employed and the alcohol abuse disorder group that was employed, as only one person in the problematic video game usage was employed. This could be due to the extra stress the job brings that one might turn to alcohol abuse in order to deal with the stress. The fourth one would be political affiliation, where the problematic video game usage was found to be more moderate, which conflicts with the current literature, as in a study by Tekelov and Gesford, usually more conservative families would have less overall alcohol consumption, while Democratic families would have higher overall alcohol consumptions. When in my study, half the alcohol abuse group found identified as more conservative. And the final one is race, there's rated GPA now, where the problematic video game age group had a higher overall GPA, which also conflicts with current literature, as in a study by Sun, problematic video game usage was found to have a decrease on like the impact of education, and Sun found that like problematic video game usage would distract students from education. And in terms of the final factor collected, which is race, there was very little difference between the groups. It was pretty consistent. And now for my other two results. The most common criteria, being able to not stop despite the desired negative effect that problematic video game usage brings, presents a very dire issue. But it does support current literature where problematic video game usage is perpetuated through an addictive dopamine. And this can lead to dire consequences, especially in youth, where it can lead to a lack of social interaction, which can lead to even worse mental health, which can lead to even worse problematic video game usage, and it leads to a massive downward spiral that is detrimental to youth and can affect them much later in life too. And the next one is that employment and substance abuse disorders. Now the alcohol abuse disorder group was much more likely to be employed. This is most likely due to the increased amount of stress placed on them by their job. This is supported by Akinola's study, in which it was found that those who face more stress, especially from a job, are more likely to consume substances. And this has many negative effects for students, especially students in high school, as it can decrease their likelihood to keep a job or get a job in the future, which can be detrimental to them. And there were many limitations in this research study. The first is that I got a lack of alcohol abuse disorder respondents and a lack of tobacco abuse disorder respondents, as I only got 4 and none for the tobacco group. And this could have led to possibly inaccurate results that don't reflect the full population. And also the demographics were limited to a Catholic private high school in Arizona, which means it's not generalizable for the larger population really. Future research could expand on the demographics or other substances. At one point I was deciding between adding other substances to my survey, and those could be looked at, such as more illegal substances and prescription medicine. And also a study given to a larger population that wasn't just a small high school survey with 350 respondents could better represent the overall population. And of course there are other areas of problematic video game usage and substance abuse disorders that need to be expanded on. So in conclusion, there was very little to no demographic connection between problematic video game usage, and substance abuse disorders. This goes against current literature, as current literature affirms that there is a connection between problematic video game usage and substance abuse disorders. Another conclusion we can draw from our study is that problematic video game usage is very dire to the youth, as it can lead to many negative consequences, especially when the most common criteria is that it's hard to quit and it leads to perceived negative effect. And the third one that's supported by literature is that alcohol abuse disorder is more common in those who are employed, which identifies a need for other methods of coping with stress. Works.